Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I'm Jaime and Fuego here. Bienvenidos and welcome to the horror show and another installment of a program I like to call Hail to Stephen King. Damn Rizzo, guys, every Sunday, at least, unless there isn't more Dark Tower covers to get through, but that is finally completely donezo, and boy, was that just a lot of build-up rereading all of the novels to watch a movie that was pure suctitude. I'm still hopeful that a TV series can right the ship a little bit, because that is apparently still happening, as we heard news this past week. But I always like to tackle a different topic, and since the Dark Tower is on the back burner now, and we're still a few weeks away from it coming out, which we're hoping is going to redeem a year where probably the biggest ever for Stevie K, the man that I like to call El Rey, but The Mist was pure suctitude on Spike. Ugh, it's bad. I haven't even done a review of it because I just didn't want to sit and skewer it. I know some people are into just those hammer it home and, you know, beat it like a red-headed dead horse type of stuff, but I try not to do that, especially with Work of the King, especially because I loved the original Darabont film so much, because I loved the novella so much from Skeleton Crew, so who knows, maybe I will finish the series proper and do just a full review at some point for an episode. So with The Mist being bad, The Dark Tower being bad, Pilot for Mr. Mercedes is pretty damn good, but you know, the jury is out on that one, but I see a lot of potential. I'm actually right in the middle of that book right now. I finally started the Bill Hodges Trilogy, and that's the last 3 books that I have to read before Sleeping Beauties comes out, and then I will have read every single Stephen King piece of published work, and then I'll finally be at that finish line after over 7 years of reading and collecting and all of this different stuff. But we are not here to talk about Stephen King novels today. No, 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 amigos. We are here to talk about the comic work of King, whether stuff that he wrote himself or adaptations, predominantly adaptations. So this is going to be a fun one today because there's actually a lot of rich stuff to discuss here. But the one that I want to bring up first and foremost is this baby right here. Yeah, let's see it without the glare. American Vampire. Now, this is only a piece of work that was co-written by Stephen King, but I'm starting with it not just because it's in the alphabetical descension order, but also for the fact that it's a comic that is so near and dear to my heart because I was able to portray the title character, Mr. Skinner Sweet, and the artwork in this is tremendous. That's a good look at the gentleman who is the main protagonist, or antagonist. Well, actually, he's not even so much the antagonist or the protagonist. He's a weird, like, kind of in-the-middle anti-hero, and so this is a book that back in 2010, Scott Snyder, who went on to do amazing work relaunching Batman in the New 52 with DC, he contacts Stephen King through email, and he's like, yo, I have this idea for a comic book about the first American vampire, and the difference between American vampires and, say, your Eurofangers, you know, those European vampires, is that their bloodlines are a little bit different, so their susceptibility is different. So an American vampire can actually walk in the sun, which is pretty dope, and there's different, there's almost like a rivalry between the two of them, but this comic book is about the first American vampire, Skinner Sweet, and the cool thing is that each issue is divided up into 2 different segments. So the first half is what's considered present day, at least for the series proper, and it's mid-1920s. You've got this flapper aspiring actress, and she comes into contact with Skinner Sweet, and it's all about her getting turned and, you know, seeing the European vampires as the real villains within this, and so on. Very cool, written by Scott Snyder. Amazing artwork throughout by Raphael Albuquerque, Mr. Rafa, who I actually got the opportunity to interview at Comic-Con, so definitely check out that review, or interview I should say. If you just search on the channel, you'll be able to find it. It was at Phoenix Comic-Con a few years ago. But the second half of it is where Stephen King actually takes the writing reins over. Now, he was working on notes with Scott, so it's not like completely from the brainchild of King, but he wrote the comics other half, which is the origin story of Skinner Sweet. Late 1880s, it's being told by this guy who's an author who only wrote 1 book, and he's doing like a little, I guess, book presentation, you know, Q&A discussion, and he's further saying that this is not a work of fiction, this was actual stuff that I experienced, and he talks about how this team of bandits and interactions with them, and you know, how one of them turned out to be Skinner Sweet, and it's just, it's fascinating, it's beautifully written, it's very eloquent in the fact that it is King, and you know how much King likes, you know, Westerns, and I mean, based on the Dark Tower and all the Western influence in that, and so I can't recommend this comic enough, and also the fact that I was able to star in Sweet, which you guys need to seek out here on the Horror Show channel if you've never seen it. It is a short vampire western film that we made a couple years ago that I was actually blessed enough, as I said, to star as the title character, throw a little accent in there. It was a ton of fun. We still hope, if funding is ever found, to do more. We have a couple sequel ideas already in mind, and we've been batting around that idea for a while, so check out Sweet. It was actually named as one of the top 5 kick-ass Stephen King adaptations by Dread Central. So that was a real honor for us. That article was just from a couple months ago. Yeah, so in this year of all things King, where we still have It coming out, we still have 1922 coming out, we still have Gerald's Game coming out. Both of those are premiering at Fantastic Fest next month in September, plus Owen King's co-written Sleeping Beauties. Nonetheless, American Vampire, if you have never checked it out, it was actually written by Stephen King. So that is one of the biggest and most important to mention. Next up, we have to go Dark Tower. So Dark Tower is cool in the fact that it's all about, at least initially, in the Gunslinger Born and The Long Road Home and all of the volumes that they did after that, it's all about Stephen King's work writing Roland as a kid. So in The Gunslinger, the original book, and then in Wizard and Glass, and then later on we had The Little Sisters of Eluria, which was in Everything's Eventual, and so those came in the later adaptations, but the original run, which included the Battle of Jericho Hill, the Fall of Gilead, all of these things that were only kind of grazed over in the actual novels proper, the Dark Tower novels, they're all fleshed out very wonderfully by Peter David, Robin Firth. You've got great artwork by Jai Lee, and so it's a series that I feel like is very important for anybody who not only likes the Dark Tower, but I feel like it could also be a very interesting just introduction to the novels for somebody. So if you read these first and then jump into the novels, it kind of makes sense, because even when they started doing the Gunslinger adaptations, where they were doing the Battle of Tall and the Man in Black and all these things that transpired in the very first novel proper, it still is filling in gaps. It's talking about, for instance, where, after the Fall of Gilead and Jericho Hill, where Roland is hiding in a bunch of dead bodies and stuff, it really fleshes out all of that, and him finding this girl who had this crush on him. It was like Court's daughter they were trying to set him up with, and so, once again, it's things that King just really just tapped on very quickly, maybe even just a sentence or two mention, and it's able to be expounded upon awesomely. So his partnership with Marvel has been incredibly fruitful, because besides the Dark Tower stuff, it also led into, I gotta take this enormous volume down because I'm discussing that one last, and with good reason. This is actually something which somebody asked me about just recently, right? This is one of my favorite Stephen King adaptations, and for me, it might actually be a better comic adaptation than even the Dark Tower stuff. This is Stephen King N. Yes, very simple, just the one letter. And it was actually a viewer who reminded me about this, Mr. Jason Sargis, who asked if I was familiar with this. Hell yeah, man. I have read the short story, which is in Just After Sunset, but I must say, the webcomic that they did, which was like a animated, moving, visual webcomic with like recorded dialogue and stuff, that was super awesome. But this adaptation that they did, let's just get a closer look for you right there. So it's essentially, and check out the back right there too, yeah, beautiful painted artwork, so just beautifully done. This is a fascinating story in the fact that it presents the idea of, is insanity contagious? Can it be contagious? So this guy's a therapist, and he has a patient come to him, and this patient says, hey, I'm driving around in upstate Maine, and I come by, this fenced off area where, there's like this cool looking field, and I see these rocks up in this field, and yet it's chained up, and it's very obvious that it's private property and nobody's supposed to go here. But his curiosity gets the best of him, and he decides to drive up and investigate. And he sees, just like you see on the cover there, a circle of stones, and all of these stones have like demonic faces on all of them, and you essentially realize very quickly that, okay, this might be very similar to the Oracle stuff that you encounter in the Dark Tower. It's essentially kind of a portal, a thinny, if you will. It's an area where, there is potentially some Todash insane monsters like just lurking right on the other side, and an overlapping reality. These are concepts that were also put forth in Crouch End, which is another great short story that King had done, and The Mist is another one with portals being open to not other worlds per se, like, you know, similar alternate realities. We're talking like Todash Darkness, where the most horrendous evil creatures you could ever imagine. It's really expanded upon big time in the Dark Tower series, but nonetheless, after this guy tells the story to his therapist, turns out the guy goes and kills himself. Minor spoiler. But after that happens, the therapist becomes obsessed with finding out, you know, what this field is about, and he ends up going there, and you start to realize that Ka is indeed a wheel, and just the weird cyclical nature of insanity, and how perhaps it can be contagious, and how it can pass from person to person to person. This is so beautifully illustrated. It is amazingly adapted. Once again, originally a webcomic, and I'm pretty sure it's on iTunes. You can find it on there. But yeah, seek out this graphic novel. Once again, King working with Marvel. It's been a beautiful partnership. Besides the Dark Tower stuff, he is currently also, they're still adapting things, you know? Besides the Gunslinger, I should say, they have been working on the drawing of the 3, filling in some gaps about the Eddie Dean backstory, Susanna, various other things, but also adapting the story proper. So that's cool, and I think they just finished the 4th and final volume of that, so I'm not sure if the Wastelands is the plan after that, but if you're less into the fantasy stuff or just not quite ready to dive into the Dark Tower, this is a scary, self-encompassing story that I cannot recommend enough. So, to get that back on the shelf. Another King adaptation that I think I should mention here quickly before, and you've seen me with this on the show before, but Bernie Wrightson did an amazing job illustrating Stephen King's Creepshow, which he well, it was a George Romero film. Cover art was by Jack Kamen, actually, and it was all the interiors that were done by Wrightson. And, I mean, he does a fantastic job of adapting The Crate and, you know, all of these other short stories that are so awesome, which are on this. This was actually just re-released recently in the Year of the King. Of course it would be re-released, but this, my friends, is a in pristine condition original copy. So I know I've talked about that before on the show, so I'm not going to go into extensive detail. Another comic which is actually not even listed on the Stephen King A to Z comic website, which I find kind of funny, but in the early 80s we had this Marvel magazine group. So once again, King working with Marvel. It's an adaptation of The Lawnmower Man, but not to be confused with the Pierce Brosnan film that we saw, which was pretty much nothing at all like the short story, although I find merit in both. I think the Lawnmower Man movie is really trippy with some of the just AI and virtual reality stuff, and there's some dialogue that I've actually ripped from that film and tried to put into, you know, songs that I've written and stuff like that. But this is adapting the short story, which, if I remember correctly, it's either Skeleton Crew or Night Shift. I'm pretty sure it's Skeleton Crew, but very different in the fact that you've got this kind of slob of a dude who, you know, his yard is getting unruly, and he calls this company, you know, goes with somebody a little bit cheaper, and turns out it's this crazy guy who's like running around naked eating all the grass. It's like really effed up and strange. And so yeah, the Marvel magazine group is definitely, it was for I even think, no, it doesn't say for mature readers, but definitely with the stuff that happens in this comic, it is for mature readers. I actually just reread it recently, and the art is cool, but damn, is it just so weird. Anyway, getting to more King comic adaptations. This is actually one, woo, if I can get it off this shelf, because these omnibuses are so effing heavy. Jesus Crimbus. Ah. Actually, I should just pull both of these. Crimbus, all right. So, this is actually one that a lot of people gave King some shit for and didn't think it was very good. This is Road Rage, which is an adaptation of a short story called Throttle, which King did, or at least I believe it's Throttle. No. Yes, indeed, Throttle. And so that was a story which was inspired by the story called Duel, which was a Richard Matheson thing. So Throttle originally appeared in print form, co-written by Joe Hill, King's son and King, and it was in this I Am Legend, like all these stories which were inspired and like an homage and a tribute to Richard Matheson, who was apparently the man who King claims influenced him the most in his writing style. So surprise, surprise, it's not Poe, it's not Lovecraft or all these other influences, Robert Bloch or whatever, which people point to. No, it was actually Richard Matheson. But so they ended up adapting Throttle, the story that Joe Hill and King wrote together, as this comic book called Road Rage, and it's very gory and crazy. It's essentially about this crazy biker gang who is cooking up a bunch of meth, and there's an accident at one of the houses that they're doing stuff at, and it blows up, and so they stop at this diner, and turns out this guy with this huge semi starts just picking off and like running over all of these different bikers in this gang, and they're sorted people, so you don't necessarily feel too bad for them. But I've actually talked about Throttle here before on the show. If you guys want to check out, I basically covered 3 different short stories in an early Hail to Stephen King episode. I talked about In the Tall Grass, which he co-wrote with Joe Hill. I talked about Facing the Crowd, which is one he co-wrote with the dude he did Faithful with, which is the story about the Red Sox finally winning the World Series. Not scary there, just scary how long it took for them to actually win again and become prominent. But I also talked about Throttle there. So this is a pretty bloody good adaptation. It's IDW, so it's not him working with Marvel, unfortunately. And some people said that this was crappy. I don't know. I actually thought that while the art is not necessarily my style, the dynamic with the rebellious son and the father was something that I, unfortunately, from personal experience, can relate to, since I was a hellraiser of a youngster, and my Bible teacher father was not too happy about it. Granted, my Bible teacher father was not cooking methamphetamines and crazy stimulants of that nature, but it's interesting when you find out the connection between why this guy in the semi is like running over all these bikers, because there is a very cool connection and stuff. So yeah, I actually highly recommend Road Rage. We actually did a giveaway for this book a number of months ago on the channel because we had a few extra copies of it. So Road Rage, definitely worth checking out as well, although I would definitely say check out N first. Next up is one which is a heartbreaker for me, and this is the adaptation of the Talisman that King did with Del Rey, and it only ended up being 1 volume. And the Talisman is one of my absolute favorite Stephen King books like ever. It was when, even before The Dark Tower, really, I mean before The Dark Tower took off proper, because The Gunslinger had already come out, but this is where King, along with Peter Straub, really explored the extended universe of fantasy, that would become more prominent in the later Dark Tower stuff, and also in The Eyes of the Dragon and whatnot. But you've got this kid Jack Sawyer, his mother is dying, she's an aging actress, and he has this evil uncle named Morgan, and it's an interesting dynamic, because with the help of this brother named Speedy Parker, who he meets just kind of walking around next to like the carnival kind of like fair type place one day, he ends up taking a sip of this magic juice, and he jumps over to this place called the Territories, which is another realm which is very similar to our own. And you find out that people have twinnies on one side, so like basically his mother, her twin in this other like realm, mirroring dimension of sorts, which is very similar to Midworld, might just be Midworld. You'll probably have to read the book to make the direct connections, but it's actually another woman of power and prominence, a queen, who is in fact dying herself. And so there's the dueling thing, and he's trying to find this talisman in this crazy, like fortress of sorts, so that he can actually save his mother. And he meets this guy named Wolf, who is like a friendly werewolf type guy, and he ends up going through wastelands very similar to stuff we see in the 3rd Dark Tower book. But the unfortunate thing is this only made it to 1 volume, and we never really got to see the story properly fleshed out. I think it pretty much ends, if I'm not mistaken, like shortly after he gets over, and I think it's like right when he meets Wolf. So yeah, crazy. So this is one that it's a great adaptation. The art is good, but it's just really such an amazing initial volume. But the fact that you only get Jack Sawyer just jumping back and forth a couple times and really understanding the nature of the 2 dueling worlds, and in the end it's only kind of a little tease, which, oh, that's a bummer. But hey, great artwork and everything else that I mentioned already, so I highly recommend checking it out. Now, the one thing that I can't personally show on this, because it was never released in physical form, is something that is exclusively available at StephenKing.com, and it is a comic version of Little Green God of Agony, I believe is the title. And This is a story I didn't encounter till recently because it's actually in the Bazaar of Bad Dreams over there, but it's been floating around since the early 2010s, and it's about this very skeptical nurse who goes to be a caretaker for this dying millionaire, billionaire, insane amount of money this guy has. And there's this interesting healer of sorts that she does not believe is legit who is coming, and he's got a religious slant to him, and he's gonna expel demons that are in this man, which are apparently hindering him from actually being able to fully recover from this horrible accident that he was in. So it's not what she suspects, which is an unwillingness to actually do the proper physical therapy and do all of these other things after this plane crash that he's involved in. But yeah, this man thinks that there is something deeper and darker and more sinister, and I can't confirm one way or the other who is correct, but great artwork, and once again, you can't argue with the price point of free, man. So go to StephenKing.com, check out Little Green God of Agony. I wish they would release this in a physical form. Please, Daddy, please, please, Mr. King. We need to see that shizzle in physical form. So as I reach the finish line here now, I'm going to be talking about my personal favorite comic version of Stephen King material. And you guys see it right here. And this actually ties in with my question of the week, which is actually coming from Stephen King fan 2244. What's up, buddy? I'm not sure if you still tune in on the reg, but hope that you get this, because if you do see this video, hit me up, and then it's taken a while, in some instances 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes more. You know how when you win prizes, they're like, please allow, 6 to 8 weeks, blah, 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 blah. Just give me some time, man, because these are free shirts that we're paying for. We're paying for shipping. We don't really make any money yet on this channel, so just bear with and things will eventually come. But so Stephen King fan 2244 asks, I have a question. What character, novel, short story, novella, do you see yourself as and or connect the most to? So thank you very much for that question, sir. And that leads me to The Stand. The Stand, despite the enormous adaptation you see there of the Dark Tower, or at least the prequel Dark Tower, and then the books that they've started to adapt down there, I still don't have any of the drawing of the threes, as I mentioned earlier, but The Stand is my favorite Marvel adaptation, and this is a beautiful omnibus that I just recently purchased. I still have all of the original comics proper. There are some tremendous covers in here, including one where a character's going through the Lincoln Tunnel and all this other stuff, and that character is in fact, if you're familiar with The Stand, we have this enormous cast of characters that are basically sprinkled all throughout the entire country when this crazy virus hits and kills like 99% of the population. Some are good, some are bad. They all gravitate towards Boulder, Colorado, and towards Las Vegas, respectively, the good and the bad. You've got Mother Abigail, you've got Mr. RF, the Man in Black, Walter O'Dim, Randall Flagg, yeah, that's right, the coolest villain in all of Stephen King lore, in my opinion. But there's a character in New York City, he's a musician, he's there visiting his mother, who is afflicted with the virus, unfortunately, and mild spoiler, does go on to pass away, but a character by the name of Larry Underwood. And Larry Underwood is the character in all of Stephen King lore that, of all of these novels, novellas, short stories, all of them that I have read and just adored so very much, Larry Underwood is my dude. He is the guy that I relate the most to because he's flawed. He's a very flawed hero, and he wants to do the right thing, but, you know, if I was to point out to, the way I was raised, sinful nature or whatever, but, nobody is perfect if we're going to get just real with it here. And he's a flawed person, He's a musician that has not always made the right decisions. He chases money, he chases women, fond of the bottle, all of these different things, vices and whatnot. But damn it, does he strive to do the right thing. And he's one of many characters in this, along with Stu Redman, and it's such a rich cast of people. And so, to answer that question, Larry Underwood is the guy who eventually does redeem himself proper, in my opinion. But The Stand is my favorite Stephen King adaptation because it is possibly the most faithful that I've ever seen, and that even includes the Stand miniseries, which Mick Garris did an incredible job on. I've talked multiple times about that adaptation here on this program, but the comic is even better. The artwork is tremendous. I mean, just the talent involved in it alone. You've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different, they broke it up into 6 different segments, so to speak, because the novel is so sprawling, over 1,000 pages, but I mean, tremendous work was done on this, and just looking at it, man, I mean, the Aguirre Sacasa and Perkins, the entire team behind this at Marvel, this was basically their big undertaking right after finishing the initial run of the Dark Tower, before they started doing the, you know, the gunslinger ones that I mentioned. But this is sprawling. It adapts even more faithfully than the TV series did, including one really, really nasty encounter that the Trash Can Man has. I was surprised. I was wondering if they were really going to go for it in the comic book, and yeah, did they ever. It's one that for me is like on par, well, not quite on par with that infamous scene in It with all the kids and stuff, but nonetheless, it's pretty bad. And so it adapts it faithfully. Some of the dialogue feels like it's pulled right out. There's really not a lot of liberties taken in the comic adaptation that Marvel did of The Stand. So I wish that they would tackle maybe an It comic at some point, and who knows, with the popularity of the current film, perhaps that'll happen. Or if they could go and do, you know, a Pet Sematary comic, or, you know, Salem's Lot, or even something that we haven't seen adapted yet, you know, maybe like a, I don't know, like a Lisi story, or a, I don't know, Doohickey, one of those later novels that I really loved. Honestly, a revival comic book would be awesome, because that's another character and book that just really surprised the hell out of me. But I digress from the comics, guys. So you've seen here, in just all that we've talked about today, that Stephen King has done, he's had so many adaptations on both TV and screen, but there is there's lots of visual stuff that has been done of his, and I guess maybe you could say Cycle of the Werewolf was kind of a comic, but no, it's more a novella with an illustration every chapter, so that doesn't quite count. Same with the Charlie the Choo Choo book up there that ties in with the Dark Tower. So bottom line, check out King's comics, because they're really all solid. The only one that's really a big disappointment for me is the fact that the Talisman only got just that one chunk and then nothing more. You know, they finished the Dark Tower stories, at least in their particular sections. They got all the way through The Stand. They didn't do like 2 or 3 volumes and, you know, have the team of heroes start off to Vegas and then it's over. So just check out all of those. N is especially awesome, as I mentioned. If you don't want something which is a massive undertaking, if you don't want to try to collect all of the Dark Tower stuff or all of the Stand stuff, over Road Rage and you know, some of the other, you know, more easily digestible, N is probably my top recommendation for an introduction if you like really scary King stuff. But the mother of them all, possibly my favorite King novel ever, The Stand, was just immensely and amazingly done by Marvel Comics. So I gotta extend a grande gracias to, obviously, Stephen King fan 2244, to all of you peeps, all of you fellow fans of El Rey that tune into this program on the reg. I greatly appreciate you. If you have any comments, man, ask a question. Who knows, maybe that'll turn into the topic of an upcoming video. There's going to be some It coverage coming up. We've got some Sleeping Beauties coverage. I'm planning to be going to the Sai King book signing in Portland. So if anyone is going to be in Portland, I believe it's October 4th. And I'm going to be heading up there. Never been to the Northwest before, so that's going to be an amazing book signing for the Sleeping Beauties tour that he's doing with Owen. Looking forward to that. And I also have to give a big gracias to one of the regular viewers here. Her name is Sandra Wildbranner. I actually did one of her questions a number of months ago as a episode of Hail to Stephen King, and she was kind enough to send a thank you card when she finally received her shirt, and she just recently sent me nice softcover copy of The End of Watch. So once I get to that in the Bill Hodges trilogy, I can just carry this around with me on the train or whatever, as opposed to having to lug around that big hardcover. So that can just stay all nice on my shelf. So Sandra, thank you so very much to you and your husband for the dedicated support of the show, especially being fellow Arizona desert dwellers here. Much love to you, and much love to all the Sai King fans once more. I've been Jaime and Fuego. You can find me here on the Horror Show, on the reg, weekly. I'm also on all forms of social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and the YouTube, it's very close. Very close. Things are simmering, and you will see new Infuegotainment stuff coming very soon. We've got a Guardians of the Galaxy 2 review for the home release, which is coming up, and if you guys have seen that music video, hilariousness. And you got some oh goodness, hail to the Hoff on there. So don't hassle the Hoff, bro. No, he's nowhere near on the level of Sai King. But in any event, gracias, Thankee Sai, all of y'all for tuning in, and until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more with some additional King coverage, hasta luego, sin amigos. I hope that it is sooner rather than later, and until then, stay scared. and read Stephen King. Comics, novels, he's got so much stuff.